Welcome to the America's Future podcast with General Michael Flynn, sponsored by America's Future, Inc. At America's Future, we believe in the God-given freedom of the individual. We regard the Constitution as the most important instrument ever devised to defend that freedom. We understand that our liberties and private enterprise capitalism have made America the freest and most bountiful nation on earth. It is our duty, our obligation, to fight for America and ensure that government remains the servant and not the master of we the people. Here now is General Michael Flynn and the President of America's Future, Ed Martin.
Welcome to America's Future with General Michael Flynn. I'm Ed Martin, the President of America's Future, and it's a great privilege to spend this time talking with General Flynn, hearing from him, and hearing from you. And so please visit americasfuture.net. americasfuture.net. There'll be a chance there to send us your comments, send us your thoughts, and otherwise give us your feedback on this podcast. America's Future with General Mike Flynn. General Michael Flynn is known to most Americans, his long career of service in the Army, his service to the United States in government, and also very prominently in the last few years. He's known to a lot of other people as husband, father, grandfather, brother, and in lots of other ways. And as we talk about America's Future, this organization, we'll be also talking about America's Future. What's the future? America's Future, Inc. is an organization started in 1946. It's one of the longest standing conservative organizations in the country. It's been led by famous leaders and businessmen and women. It's had a great history of communicating about the exceptionalism of America. So we encourage you, again, please visit americasfuture.net and check back there for lots that's going on. So we're going to talk with General Flynn. He's here with us. And General Flynn, first of all, what is America's Future with a small f, not the organization? What's the future of America?
Well, America's future is before I talk about the future, what it is dependent upon. America's future is dependent upon every single individual in this country, because what I like to say, as we breathe the fresh air of liberty, we only breathe the fresh air of liberty because of individual liberties. Our entire Declaration of Independence primarily, and that espouses our who we are, and we are a nation created by. In fact, in the Declaration, it talks about a creator, and we have a set of commandments, if you will, called the Bill of Rights, and those are the principles that we live by and the promises that we live by. And so, if we, the people of this country, don't get involved in the lifeblood of our country, then we will not have a future. And so what does America's future look like today? Well, what I like to say, Ed, is that America's future stands at a crossroads, and we have two directions to take. We have a direction that says we're going to continue on this beautiful path of democracy called the Constitutional Republic, or we are going to move towards socialism, Marxism, and communism. That's it. Those are the two choices. And so if we, the people, don't get involved and in the lifeblood of our country, then we will take the path to the left, so to speak, to use a left-right metaphor. And that direction is a direction that has been put in place for many, many decades. And it just seems like the speed that the left, the movement of the left in our country has picked up, certainly by this last election that we all know, everybody knows it, the various polling that they're doing for this presidential election on the 3rd of November shows more and more people see the election as fraudulent. So say what you want about the election and the process, but we're facing that. We're facing this shift of political ideology towards socialism, and this is not a social club that we're talking about. This is a socialist ideology with elements of Marxism and communism. So if we, and I like to say now, I use the phrase, local action has national impact. People need to quit complaining about the politicians in Washington, D.C., and the politicians even in the county level or at the town or parish level, because the more you complain about them, the worse it gets. It's we, the people, who make the decisions about who are in these positions of power and authority in these political seats. So if you're complaining about them, then get involved somehow, particularly at the local level, and vote them out. Get rid of these people. So we can't sit there and say those people in Washington, D.C. are terrible. Those people at the county commissioner board are terrible, or those people on the school board in my local county are terrible. You know what? Go do something about it. Quit complaining. So now, if we went back and we looked at the sacrifices of the men and women, primarily the men, but certainly many of the wives who I've studied and studied the founders of our country and studied their families, read their histories, read their diaries in some cases, and looked at the quality of people that they were and the sacrifices that they gave, so we could have, a literally 250 years almost of a democratic idealism and a constitutional republic, not without its sacrifices, not without its struggles, and not without adversaries around the world trying to steal our lifestyle in the middle of the night. And that goes to communism, that goes to Nazism, it goes to the Civil War back in the 1800s, it goes to the American Revolution, the French Revolution. All the different aspects, the Spanish-American War, all the different things that we have been involved in, and I think that people need to understand that. People really need to understand that this is not a time for everybody to kind of sit around their dinner tables or at the local, bar or at the local breakfast joint or whatever, and complain. I don't mind complaining. I'll complain just as like the rest of them, but I'm going to get involved. I'm going to get involved. And my level of involvement is to a degree is dependent on the platform that I have been honored to have and to be given by the American people. And part of that platform is the organization called America's Future, which you talked about. But it's more than America's Future as an organization. It's America's Future as a result, as something that I have fought for, and I will continue to fight for. And I always tell people it's no longer about me. I'm beyond the nonsense stage of my life. It's really about my grandchildren, more so than even my own children, because my own children are older now. It's really about my grandchildren and looking at them and seeing what will they experience. Let's just take the next 80 years, right? It's 2021, so let's just say in 8 more decades of this century, what will transpire? When we look back at the last century, and I had a great mother who in a small way was part of this organization, America's Future, because she knew Phyllis Schlafly, and they knew each other because of the right to life issues and challenges that they both got involved in, and I was raised sort of under that banner as well. So I just add that as a sidebar, because I think that as I look through the past 100 years, and I really see them through the stories of my mother and my father that my mother and father told us, particularly my mother, and my father, who was a World War II and Korea War veteran, retired out of the Army as a sergeant in the early 60s. And then, of course, we go into the Vietnam War and all that sort of business. So as I project history into the future, and that's a really, really difficult thing to do, because you're trying to say, what is my vision of America? What do I believe? So speaking for Mike Flynn, as I look into the future, I have to take into account not only the history of the United States of America, but the history of the world. And the history of the world, factually, reality is that nation states do not last forever, right? There's a reason why we use the word like Byzantine to describe something that's old. Well, the Byzantine Empire was one of the oldest empires in the history of the world, yet there's nobody around from Byzantine anymore. They're gone. Why are they gone? Because they collapsed, just like the Athenian Empire, just like the Roman Empire, just like the British Empire. British Empire up to about 1908, 1910 timeframe. The sun never set on the British Empire. Well, it sets it sets in a couple hours now, because they're no longer the empire that they were. And so now we have this this American empire, and we, as a humble nation of principally servants of freedom, we try not to impose, although that's It remains to be seen, but we try not to impose our way of life around the world in ways where communism actually does. Communism will come in and take over a country and never leave. We have been accused of that, and there's great argument for that too. But I would also say that what we like to try to do is to bring freedom to people who aren't free. And I know that there's many countries around the world that still look at the United States of America as the beacon of hope, or the beacon of light, the shiny city on the hill, or what I like to say is the true North Star for the rest of the world to follow or to chase towards that idea of freedom. And so as I project into the next 80 years to specifically address the question, what will the next 80 years look like? Well, I am a believer. I am anti-war, but I am a believer that peace is the aberration and war is the norm. And I can talk to you rhyme and verse, and in fact, I've written about it in my book, and I talk about it because human nature and human behavior is where we are always competing against each other. There's always this adversarial approach, and when you take it up to the notches of nations and states or nation states, and you're competing for ideas and ideologies, and you're competing for economies of massive scale, and you're competing for resources, principally food, water, and energy resources around the world. And you have nations like China that has roughly 1.6 billion people, nations like India that have 1.3 billion people. India in the next 10 years will likely surpass China in population. And so now you're talking about just two nations that have about a third of the nations of the world's population. So there will be tension in the world over the next 80 years, and that tension will result in wars. I mean, every single century that we have been in as a nation, as the United States of America, and every single historical period of a century or more, a millennium over time, there's always been these massive, in some cases, massive wars, many cases, these sort of firebrush wars. I mean, look at this year, September 11th, 2021 is 20 year anniversary that the United States has been involved in Afghanistan and or Iraq and or the Middle East and Central Asia against the war on terror, right? The war against radical Islamism. So 20 years. So when somebody says, "Oh no, Flynn's wrong about peace and war," really? So the first two decades of this century, we have been at war, right? The right. Politicians don't want to call it that. All the people that have never been to a combat environment where somebody's shooting at you or dropping a mortar around to try to blow up your camp. Those that have been there know what I'm talking about. Those that have never been there don't have any clue. So, the politicians up on high, they try to call these things, something other than what it isn't. A peacekeeping operation, or when somebody's trying to kill you, you'll know the difference quickly. And the one thing about faith, because I want to bring faith back into this conversation, we have had a systematic removal of God from our society. Okay. Now, there is this idea of separation of church and state, but it doesn't mean that we disregard the values and the reason why our country was created. People can, because I'm still talking about the future. I'm still talking about at least the next 80 years and everything that I'm saying. But you have to understand how our nation came about in order to understand where we are going and what the rest of this century is going to be. Because my life, I won't last until the end of this century. But if my granddaughter lives to the age of my mom, she'll only be in her mid-80s. She'll only be in her mid-80s at the turn of the century. Wow. So in her lifetime, she is going to experience something that we don't know what exactly is going to happen, but I can tell you that the historical factual trends of the things that are likely to happen, where you're going to have this adversarial competition between nation states for resources, for ideologies, and there will be competition, and the competition won't just be in, who's selling the most widgets. It's going to be in a very physical competition for those resources, and it will likely result in some type of physical conflict, whether it's a massive war or whether it's one of these minor brush fire wars that we've always been engaged in when we put democracy and we compete against communism. And that's happening right now in our own country. What has happened in our country, and this is where, again, the future is going, and it goes back to why did the people flee Europe in the 1500s and 1600s to come here to the United States of America? And then, the founding fathers didn't just write the Constitution of the United States of America and the Declaration of Independence and the Bill of Rights. They didn't just sit down one Friday night or over one long weekend and write the thing. They actually thought about it and studied and discussed it. The Sons of Liberty, as an example, up in Massachusetts, they really thought about these issues for the better part of a couple of decades, certainly 15 years. And then when they finally the right people came together, they crafted it. So they wanted it to last as long as could possibly last, as long as, like Benjamin Franklin says, as long as you can keep it, right? It's a republic as long as you can keep it. So the history of our country, and it could say it just like this, the future of our country is based on our acknowledging and our understanding of where we've come from. And we have come from not a the promise of America is discovered in the 10 Commandments as it was written in the Bill of Rights. People think, they'll argue and go, well, the Bill of Rights is a result of the Magna Carta. Well, the Magna Carta goes back, it's very biblical. And so we have to have our churches in the, as again, I'm talking about the future. We have to have our churches fight again to renew the faith of this country. I don't care what your ecumenical path is, whether you're a Catholic or whether you're a Calvinist, doesn't matter to me, or you're of the Jewish faith. It doesn't matter to me, as long as you are a believer in the Constitution and you're a believer in the republic of this country and the path towards this continuation of the experiment in democracy. We are at risk right now because of the removal of God from everything that we have done. And now I'll take it back to tactics and the Democratic Party. I think it was 2012, Ed, and you can correct me, you can fact check me on this. I think 2012 was when the Democratic Party platform removed God from their platform, because people of religion, people of faith, aren't the kind of people that they need in the socialist ideology, in the Marxist ideology. And so, anyway, as we go forward into history, it's all about how do I say to my grandchildren, look at my grandchildren in the eye as they get older, and I tell them, or they ask me, well, what did you do, Grandpa? And I like to say that I've done everything I can to maintain the Constitution and to maintain the American values that we were handed by our founders and our forebears, and given us, and who gave us the honor and the privilege and the right to breathe this fresh air of liberty.
Yeah, we're talking. Let me pause for 1 second. And General Flynn, you're right. I'm fact checking in real time. It was 2012 when the Democrats removed God from their platform, their national platform that year. Well, I should mention to our listeners of this podcast, again, it's America's Future with General Michael Flynn, and please visit americasfuture.net. You'll see the organization that he's heading now as chairman. I work with him there. But before we started recording this, our producer, Dave Powell, who is with the Family Vision Media, actually opened us with a prayer. And when we finished the prayer, General Flynn said, "Is that tape? Was that recorded? Let's include that." And we hadn't recorded it. So the point here is that you've got to bring God back into your lives and into what you're doing in so many ways. And people are going to find their way to do that. But General Flynn, you mentioned after hearing you talk about the future, you said we have to know where we've come from. And I want to ask you, because our listeners know of you. Everybody, in fact, you've told me the story. People come up to you and they actually sometimes will touch you like that, like you're actually real, because they've seen you on TV. 2/3 of the time they've treated you badly on TV. Let's not dwell on that. But I want to ask you about people in your life, in your past, And, in highlighting for our listeners, America's Future Inc., this organization has been around since 1946, been actively promoting America's exceptionalism and what's great about America. One of the great leaders is a mutual friend of yours and mine, General Jack Singlob, who played a role in your life. But who are the key people? When people look back and they say, what made my my life? It's never perfect, right? Not everything is perfect in our lives. Nobody's perfect. In fact, I like to tell people we're all part of the fallen, right? We're all, but who are the key people in your life that were mentors or figures that mattered to you that got you to be General Michael Flynn at this moment in history?
Yeah. So I appreciate you asking. The two key people, and I'm thankful that I had two, were my parents, Charlie Flynn and Helen Flynn. And as I said earlier, Charlie Flynn, my father, was a World War II and Korea War vet. And he retired as a sergeant from the Army. He was just absolutely excuse me, I'm sorry for coughing. I like that. It's emotional because both my parents are deceased now, but I was really lucky to have two strong parents. And my father taught all of us. I'm one of 9 children from an Irish Catholic family, and in a lower middle income kind of upbringing. And my father got out of the Army with 8 children at that time, and my brother Joe was born about 2 years later. After we returned from his final assignment in Germany, where he was an instructor at a joint school, and he went to work as a teller in a bank. And so anyway, my parents were the most integral part of who I am. And so my father taught us all the golden rule, all of my 9 brothers and sisters. And the golden rule is essentially treat others like you like to be treated. And to really treat people fairly and honestly in your whole life. And that's who we are as a family. So family is a very strong foundation of why I feel like I am the way I am. My mother, on the other hand, was, as a young woman graduating from high school, she was valedictorian and salutatorian for her high school class and got a full ride to it's essentially the girls' college of Brown University at the time. And this is like right prior to, this is right around World War II starting time frame. And instead of going off to college like a lot of her friends that were in different capacities did, my mother, World War II kicked in. She loved my father. She said, I'm gonna do what I can for the war effort part. And anyway, she got involved with him and got involved in the community. And one of the things that my mother always taught us was to be a lifelong learner, never stop learning, because whatever education you can get, particularly formal education, whether you used it or not, really didn't matter. The fact that you had it, you then had more opportunities, and it caused you to always be thinking and doing things based on something that you learn, something that you then you judge for yourself, you analyze for yourself, you let your own mind be the judge of it, right? And you didn't have to be told what to do all the time because you knew what you were doing. And later on in life, my mother, after she raised the 9 of us, she then went back off to college, and she got a degree in, I think, definitely in economics and I think history. But then further on in life, she went ahead and got a law degree. And I think at the age of 69, she ended up graduating as a lawyer just because it was something that she wanted to do. But she was proving by example her counsel to us to never stop learning and to always be a lifelong learner, and to not only seek life experiences in the different things that you did, but also to seek formal education. So it's really important that so when you're talking about mentors, those are the 2 biggest mentors. The other mentors or the other leaders that I saw in my life, or it's clearly my other brothers and sisters. And I have a phenomenal family. And then somebody else.
There's a lot of Flynns, and they are all, one after another. They're closer and more loyal and more. It is amazing. I've observed it up close. It's amazing.
And it's because, like, we like to use the phrase "fight like a Flynn," right? I mean, we've sort of evolved from that out of these last 4 years of persecution, political persecution. But it's there's a lot to that. And then the other person in my life, and then the other family that joined me as well as I joined them, is my wife's family. And my wife is Lori, and she and I and we've known each other since we were 13 years old. We just had our 40th anniversary just recently, this past couple of weeks ago, May 9th. And so we met each other as young people. And as I said, I'm an Irish Catholic. Lori's from a Portuguese community, and the Portuguese community in the area where we grew up with is a very strong, tightly, family knitted community in a beautiful church called Jesus Savior Church. And so we bonded as young kids, as friends, and sort of like, sort of puppy love kind of stuff. But then we realized that we had so much in common, and we stayed connected, and we ended up getting married and having our own family, and we have grandchildren now. And so it's like I use the phrase now, you have to like the person that you love. And but she's also a leader and a mentor. She did that my whole military career too. My God, the number of young families that would come to her for advice and assistance just because she's that kind of person. So those are people in my life. You mentioned Jack Singlaub and other people in sort of my military career. I would say that it's funny, as a general officer, if I look back over my military career, I've had a series from the time I was a platoon leader until the time I retired as the senior military intelligence officer from the Department of Defense and the director of DIA. I had a series of non-commissioned officers who, more than the bosses, more than the admirals and the generals and the colonels that I had, but a series of sergeants first class, first sergeants, sergeants major, senior enlisted advisors, both Air Force, Army, Marine Corps, Navy, over my career. And every single one of them remains in my life today. Every single one, from
wow.
My platoon sergeants when I was in the 82nd Airborne, where I first started, to when I returned to be a battalion commander in the 82nd, my sergeant major, Ron Heil, and to the senior enlisted advisors that I have when I was at the Defense Intelligence Agency, in really two senior airmen who were senior enlisted at the 3-star level, who in their own right are just incredible leaders and mentors, and they have stayed in my life, and we stay in touch with all of them, every single one of them. And Heber Felix is another name, Sergeant Major Heber Felix, and these are all people that served at least 23 to 25 to 35 years in their own right in our military, for our military, and in many cases all in combat or in various stages of combat. Ross Monroe's another. He's a Navy chief, Navy SEAL, and a senior master chief who was my senior enlisted advisor when I was over in Afghanistan for a little while. These are all people that stayed in my life and have continued to stay in my life, and I'm in touch with them, by a text today. And I always seek their guidance because they're so grounded, they're so knowledgeable, and they're so smart about, and they're from all over the country too, by the way. So that allows me to get a reflection of kind of where they are and what they're doing and what the sentiment is in their own neighborhoods and in their own families and in their own networks. And that to me is much more grounded than I could recite a bunch of generals and admirals that I work for, and over time those are fine, and they're good people and they served, but we all a lot of us go our different ways. And what you do find is you get more senior in the military, particularly in the military. People don't know this. The last promotion that you ever will receive in the military is to 2-star. Okay, is to Major General or Rear Admiral in the Navy. That's the last promotion. Everything after that, 3 and 4-star, are political appointments, and you have to be nominated by the President of the United States, and you have to be confirmed by the Senate. What's a kind of a funny aspect of my military career is I was nominated by Barack Obama twice, and I was Senate confirmed twice.
Wow. And
one of those jobs was as the Assistant Director of National Intelligence, and the other job was as the Director of the Defense Intelligence Agency. So some pretty big jobs. And I, as I look back at how the Obama administration, moved me out early. I spent 2 years as the director of DIA, which were two of probably some of the best years of my life, certainly in the military. And we achieved an amazing amount in that period of time. But when you have a disagreement, and I think Jack Singlov, you mentioned Jack Singlov, would understand it, because he had a disagreement with Jimmy Carter, way back when, and Jimmy Carter basically, that administration had Jack Singlov removed, and here's a guy that was a phenomenal. He is truly a hero, phenomenal warrior, and originator of the OSS and the CIA in the early days of the CIA. Jack. I won't speak for him, but I would say that if I was to ask him, my guess is he's probably pretty ashamed of the way what the CIA has become. That's where I was able to get appointed twice and serve twice under the previous administration, which is interesting. And and our thing, I'll finish with this. Our thing about in the military, when I got out of the mentors, my mother and father, all the enlisted guys and gals that I work with, my wife, was always speak the truth when you're asked a question about what it is that you believe in. And so when you do that in the political world, you get persecuted. You get persecuted, and that's sort of these last 4 years of persecution is partly due to that.
We're talking again, General Mike Flynn with America's Future with General Mike Flynn, our podcast for the America's Future organization. If you please visit americasfuture.net and find out more. And lots of folks are getting involved through that organization. It's a 501c3 organization doing education and outreach on America's greatness and what America's future can be. General Flynn, I wanted to pause. I think a lot of people hadn't heard understood that detail about being nominated for a third star. That's political, right? So on these kind of things, here's a question I have for you. When I hear you describe your wife, your family, extended family, your history, and I just heard you say it, it feels like a blessing of amazing number of people that came in to your life when you needed them. And so, it's unbelievable to me, actually. But a lot of people listening are, maybe they're divorced, or their life hasn't worked out the way they are. And somehow, and I think the military is one way I've heard you talk about this. We have to be for each other. And understand not everybody, not every, and by the way, I know your life story close enough to know none of it's perfect. I mean, we all have our ups and downs in terms of family and things, and tragedies even. But a lot of people are listening saying, wow, General Flynn, he's been blessed at every turn, but I don't feel like I have that. How do you talk to people like that and maybe encourage the community that you really experienced? It didn't just happen. It happened all along the way, day by day.
Yeah, it doesn't just happen. I believe more so today than I did, certainly when I was a young kid. And as I more reflected on sort of the how fragile life is, I believe that our paths are decided upon before we're even born. Because so I really believe that, and that your path will then be clarified over one's life. And I'd sit here and tell you, I'll be the first one to admit that God knows I'm not perfect, and I've had my challenges over my entire lifetime. But I always like to say, and I say it more so now, that there's one thing more important than freedom, and it is people go, what's my freedom to do stuff? That's what's important to me. Actually, you can have your freedom taken from you, but you can never have your faith taken from you, because your faith is where it resides in your heart, and certainly in your mind, but more so in your heart. So, you can be, and I forget which biblical story talks about, it's Job or Joshua or somebody, one of the ones that, I'm not a biblical historian, but it's one of the guys that was pinned to the ground in a jail cell, and he was chained down, and guards went inside. Guards heard singing coming from inside the jail cell, and he ended up, and they went inside to check on the guy, and the guy was in there singing, even though he's pinned to the ground. They hadn't fed him in days, and he's in there singing because he was happy. He was happy in his faith with God Almighty. So we have to accept that we're not perfect. We have to accept that a faith does exist. We have to accept that there are champions for each and every one of us. We have to accept, what it is what it is, and particularly about our country, how our country is today, and it needs to be in the future. But what we don't have to accept, and this is where I want to jump to what I call maximizing one's potential. And I learned this throughout my life. And I have counseled many, many men and women about this, what I'm about to talk to you about. Maximizing one's potential requires taking risk, requires assuming some level of risk in life. And if you want to find out who you truly are, what you can truly do, when you go to do something in your work, you go to do something in, at home, or you go to do something particularly in your community, you go, I don't know if I want to get involved in that. That's going to assume some risk, maybe that people aren't going to like me, or I'm going to lose this, or I'm going to lose that. And so when people make a decision, you have to decide on what I call the harder right path. And when you take the harder right path in life, it is going to come with greater sacrifice and greater risk. And you join the military. If you join the military, trust me, that you sign on that dotted line, you're signing up not to be a mechanic or an aviator. You're signing up to give your life to this country when you sign that on that dotted line. So that's enormous risk. That's enormous sacrifice. It's enormous commitment. So people in their communities today, they have to decide whether or not you want to wear your faith on your sleeve. I find myself wearing my faith on my sleeve far more often than I used to say it. I find myself taking greater risk for my communities, and communities in my case now, because I've been given the honor of really having a national platform, which is terrific, and I appreciate it, and I'm going to use it, and it's going to come with some risk, because I know that there's always an element that's going to come after you. If you look in the wrong direction or whatever, they're going to come after you. So, and it's because they fear what it is that I talk about. And then last thing, to back up a little bit and to really specifically address your question, if there was one physical thing that I would like to be able to do is to wrap my arms around the millions and millions of people that came to my family's aid during the last 4 years, and just hug them and say thank you to America for allowing me to breathe, the fresh air of liberty as I sit here today and I am able to talk to you, because there was a massive, massive persecution, corrupt, illegal, unaccounted for persecution of me. And when people come up to me and say, I'm so sorry for what they did to you, I say to the American people, don't feel sorry for me. I don't feel sorry for myself. I feel sorry for our country, because our country could not benefit from, frankly, the experiences that I had as both a military officer and as a very strategic person. I mean, that's my education and my experience is strategy and foreign policy and national security. And I worked in fields that and was on 6 continents of the planet, and had people operating in close to 150 countries around the world in some of the jobs I was in. So I understand the complexity of our world, and I was not able to help our president, and nor the American people. So when the media, when the tech titans, and when the political left attack a person like they attacked President Trump over the last 4 years, they're not just attacking him. And this is what they don't realize. When they attack the presidency, they're attacking the American people. And the American people are tired of it. We're sick of it. And what we want is a free and fair system of government where everybody can prosper, if you're willing to work, and you're willing to work hard. So overall, in general, I throw out a special thank you to the American people for helping my family and I through these last 4 years, and having an incredible understanding of what it was that we went through, and then helping us not only financially, because it was a financial burden, but also helping us spiritually, definitely spiritually, and then emotionally as we went through the days and weeks and months that we experienced in this really ugly situation that our country was dragged through, and frankly our president was dragged through, and the people of America were dragged through, and we all know that it was all false. It was all fake, to use a word that President Trump likes to use.
Yeah.
It was fake, and it was sad. It's sad. And now we have to take what we've learned, and we've got to springboard off of that and understand that it's not over, and the fight is not over. Right. And we have to fight. Local action can have a national impact. Get involved in your communities.
I'm Ed Martin, president of America's Future, and I'm with General Michael Flynn, who is the chairman and the leader of America's Future Inc., an organization. We encourage you, if you're listening to this podcast, you may have gotten on through our website, but if not, please visit americasfuture.net, americasfuture.net. One more sort of line of comment asking General Flynn right now. We're recording this a few days before Memorial Day in 2021. I imagine for you, very differently than men and women who never served in the military, but also the leadership role you had at such a level. Memorial Day is a powerful holiday. It's not maybe quite as much of a picnicking weekend for you because of what your life has been. I wondered if you wanted to comment on Memorial Day and the importance for our nation to understand, if not celebrate, commemorate Memorial Day because of what it means.
Yeah, so we are actually, the month of May is actually Military Appreciation Month. So people ought to be, really, if you haven't thanked a veteran or haven't thanked a service member or haven't thanked a parent of some kid who's overseas serving or joined the military in your own community, go knock on their door and thank them for their son or daughter who joined the military and is serving either in a fort somewhere, United States of America, or over in places like Afghanistan or Iraq. So we need to continue to cherish and thank those who serve our country in uniform, because, like I said, when you sign in the dotted line, you're not signing up to learn a skill. You're signing up to potentially give your life for this country. The other thing, as we talk about Memorial Day weekend coming up, I want people to celebrate, but I want people to celebrate why Memorial Day exists. And I want people to celebrate it exists because we are memorializing those that have sacrificed their lives, those who have dedicated their lives, so we can have this freedom that we do have, so we can practice our faith as we desire, and so we can live the life that we want to live and not be dictated to by some socialist state as to how we are going to act or how we're going to be. The last thing that I would say, and Ed, I think you know this, more and more people will hear about the phrase "raise the flag, say the pledge." America's Future, americasfuture.net. We are going to initiate here, and I've already started it. I've already put it out on my social media. Clout Hub, I'm at Jen Flynn, at Jen Flynn on Clout Hub, and on Telegram, I'm at Real Jen Flynn. And I've already started this initiation of raise the flag, say the pledge. Raise the flag, say the pledge.
Right.
Raise the flag, say the pledge. So the initiative is to get out there and put up a flag, raise it up a pole, stick it in the side of your house, or go out there and just hold it and get, either do it yourself or get some neighbors around you or get some others in a group, and let's say the Pledge of Allegiance. And let's pledge our allegiance to this beautiful country that we have, and that is very fragile and is very precious. And as our founder said, this is an experiment in democracy, and we will keep this republic if we can. And it's always going to be challenged. So we, the people, have to step up to the plate. So, it's raise the flag, say the pledge. And as we go through Memorial Day and celebrate Memorial Day, I want you to raise the flag, say the pledge, put it out on your social media. Somehow email it to your friends, videotape it, and send it out. Let's get this thing going viral, right? Raise the flag, say the pledge, and then to follow on, because we should always cherish our our military and our veterans. We have Flag Day coming up in June 14th, and you'll hear more and more about that, especially on americasfuture.net. We will promote some flags and the Constitution and what the pledge means, and it's really, really important. So raise the flag, say the pledge, and let's get after it this Memorial Day weekend.
All right, everybody, and let me remind you, we'll have more at americasfuture.net on that flag initiative, raise the flag, say the pledge. There's a lot happening behind the scenes on that, so we're glad to preview that. In fact, we will be back. We'll do this podcast, America's Future with General Flynn, each week, at least once a week for a while, and then but we'll also want to get your feedback. If you go to americasfuture.net, sign up, send us an email through there or on social media, find your way. We want to hear what you think, what you'd like to hear. If you have comments, again, I'll brag on him because as our leader of our organization, sometimes, we just want you to know, General Flynn received tens of thousands of letters during his long political persecution, and he wrote back tens of thousands of handwritten letters and had exchanges. And the only downside I tell him is if people figure that out, they'll all send him a letter and he'll write them all back. We won't be able to get him to do anything but write letters. But it's a great conversation we started. America's Future with General Michael Flynn. We'll be doing this regularly and want to hear from you. General Flynn, any last words before we wrap things up?
Well, I do. I think maybe in the future, if we are able to handle it, maybe we do like a little 15 minutes segment of call in. I'd love to get questions from people who were able, if we could do some type of call in kind of deal too, or maybe, we do that once a month and we just have a totally call in show. So this is just the beginning, folks who are listening.
Yeah.
And we'll have some other ideas, and we definitely want your feedback, and we want to get your involvement because we have to protect what it is that we have in this country, and that is our constitutional values and principles that we live by, and we should be fearless about who we are as American citizens.
There you go, everybody. America's future is bright. America's Future with General Mike Flynn. Let me say thank you to Dave Powell and the Family Vision Media for helping us produce this program. And again, please visit americasfuture.net. There's ways for you to sign up to get our emails, also to get involved. And coming soon, more details on how to build that whole community of people who are, we're going to, as the General said, make a change wherever we are. Don't listen to cable TV telling you got to worry about all that stuff up in the swamp. Worry about where closer to home, and we'll build that together. So thank you, everybody, and God bless America. And we will be back. Please check in americasfuture.net each week.
Visit americasfuture.net to get more information or to support our work. That's americasfuture.net. And join us next time for more of the America's Future podcast with General Michael Flynn.